obviously, I mean, like I said, you have legal issues that are being argued, and you have the Supreme Court, which is the final say.
But the Supreme Court didn't look at the evidence that
They looked at
jury
all-
system.
they
They
looked
looked
at
at the
everything.
appeals, the
Right.
stuff. So, I mean, you know, again, there's a million different scenarios that can play out.
No, you're in all fairness and honesty, Commissioner, that's a disrespect to those men or women who serve on that court. Factual evidence was presented to that court. That court looked at the evidence that was presented, and even after making a ruling, they came back to ask for another ruling with the full body, and even that was rejected, based on facts. And that's all it was. It was all factual. I understand what you're saying. It was purely factual. That's all I'm saying.
That's the same evidence that the special prosecutor.
No.
It's not that.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir.
Well,
No,
it's
sir.
not.
No,
The
sir.
special prosecutor is wrong.
No, sir.
The special prosecutor is wrong.
Let's not go to
At some point, there's a conflict of
If we're
interest.
so confident that it's done, then again, that's what we're here finding out. You tell us and we'll settle it, and then we'll go. That it is what it is. I think we should take it and have it appealed.
And I think it should be pointed out, there are different standards of proof. First, in a civil matter versus a criminal matter. Second, I don't think anybody's privy to the actual information that the special prosecutors had. That's not an open file. I will say this, I mean, special prosecutors, that file hasn't been closed. You know, testimony and evidence that happened in the trial, they will also be taking that into consideration. So I don't know if anything's going to come of that or not. I do think it's different. You know, it's definitely, I think the bulk of evidence that was presented in a civil matter was done in December. But you do have differences, just like O.J. Simpson. He wasn't guilty of murder, but he got hit on the civil side, right? Two different standards. Okay, I know we got a lot of questions. We're going to need to go through these.
She was.
Gina.
Just real quickly, you know, when we had the Trans-Texas Corridor come through here, the airport come through here, and all these other things that we were able to find as citizens, one big thing I remember, and I don't know all the details about this, but I just wanted to ask if there has been done any environmental site-based study, and if not, as citizens, would we have privy to information on other landfills from other counties where they have done a site-based environmental study, how it affected, you know, the environment, whether it be water or animals or where, you know, the citizens or whatever? Could we get those studies? And is there a way we could have some type of orders for them to do an environmental site-based study under Pintail's checkbook?
Well, I will tell you this. I'm not aware of whether anybody's done any kind of comprehensive studies as far as, Rick, you have an answer for
There
that?
was a very good scientific study done of the site itself. That study was done by Pintail Landfill. All of that information is within the application. The groundwater velocity, the groundwater flow velocity that Pintail itself says from the scientific studies that they did on site says that the groundwater will flow from the southwestern corner of that landfill where they're going to build the first cell at 413 feet per year directly at the city of Hempstead. There are people with wells in between there within 900 feet that their well, that contamination will reach their well within 2.3 years. And it will take 16 years for that contamination to reach the city of Hempstead.
Rick, can I ask a question? And this is something is that flow rate that was in Pintail's study, is that different than the flow rate that was in Bluebonnet's study?
Bluebonnet never gave a flow rate as such. Bluebonnet's study was horribly flawed. It was horribly flawed for several different reasons. Number one, the method that they chose to study the transportation of contamination in the groundwater was to use what's called a groundwater availability model. This is a model that each of the 16 regions of the Texas Water Development Board has in order to predict future availability of groundwater in the state. There are a total of 16 regions in the state. Each region has their own groundwater availability model. Those groundwater availability models are designed to determine water movement over a broad regional basis. We're in Region 14. There's a total of 20 counties in Region 14. That model covers a total of 247 miles, 245 miles by 137 miles wide.
Okay.
The amount of resolution in that study, it's divided up into grids or blocks. The smallest grid or block, they're all of equal size, but the size of that is 1 mile. Each individual grid, as the computer model runs, everything within that grid is identical. It's as if everything within that 1 mile by 1 mile grid is all the same, and it's all centered at the very center of that block. When Dr. Hutchinson used that to predict the transportation of leachate contamination, it was flawed because there's no way that he can put in any amount of contamination into one single block or one single cell without it instantly being dissolved within the total volume of groundwater within that block. Because you can't insert
And for those,
contamination.
and for those that are a lot, I know some of that was over my head, but Blue Bonnet did a study. Blue Bonnet in January 2013 had Dr. Hutchinson do a study. Under his study, based on the assumptions, every study has to have certain assumptions. They assume certain flow rates. And they found that basically that if there was a catastrophic leak, that the contamination would be held to the first strata, so it would not affect wells deeper than 183 feet. Shallow wells could be affected, and then it had a plume, and that plume of potential contamination actually extended all the way to the city of Hempstead.
Yes.
And to 290, going south. Okay, but it would be shallow wells. But again, you have to take all those assumptions as true in order to be in agreement
And
with
let me
that
speak to
study.
that if I may, okay, because the landfill footprint itself crossed the boundary of 2 of those blocks. The actual values for hydraulic conductivity, which is basically a measure of how quickly water moves through soil, okay, in the northern block was 0.1 foot per day. In the southern block, the value that's built into this GAM, this groundwater availability model, was 3 feet per day. If Dr. Hutchinson had read the application, Dr. Hutchinson would have realized that in the application, they did a series of 8 individual piezometers in which they did slug tests to actually measure what the hydraulic conductivity of the soil was on site. And if he'd have looked at the application, he would have realized it wasn't 0.1 feet per day, it wasn't 3 feet per day, it was 49.6 feet per day.
Rick,
Right.
who's Dr. Is it
Dr.
Hutchinson?
Hutchison is the contracted hydrogeologist for the Blue Bonnet Groundwater Conservation District.
Rick, did you have a copy of that? Okay,
You've got the copy.
It's in the Pintail land.
It's in there. Thank you, sir.
This, and this, you know, and again, and I don't want, you know, this is excellent information. Thank you, Rick, for this information. It's educating. You know, again, the topic today, you know, is, you know, do we settle, do we not settle? You know, that's the kind of thing. So I don't want to get, and not that it's off base, it is relevant, because look, we all know how important water is going forward. We're going to be fighting over it. And the last thing you want is something that's going to come in and potentially contaminates a water supply, even if it's only the shallow wells. I still, as a landowner, how does that affect property values? And that's something else that hasn't even been mentioned today. I know it was mentioned last night. You know, you look at the benefits the host agreement could provide, you got to offset that. What about the loss in property values? That hits our tax base. That's less revenue.
But Judge, I think we're also getting off point in that, because us rescinding this does not stop that landfill. And my question is I hope to God that if this other study is correct, the TCEQ will look at that and go, There's no way we can do that.
That's what you're after.
I would love for that to happen.
That's why we're going through the.
And that's why there is a contested case.
And that's why you have.
And-
Mr. Walsh, I know, but Mr. Walsh, I've never come up and said, I hope you lose. I'm not arguing your fact. I asked.
No, but what you're asking
Well, here's,
the people to do is to tell the commissioners court not to settle this.
But what does that have to do
And
with
what do you think's gonna happen if
Well,
Waller County doesn't
Here,
settle?
my question is if it's that bad of 200 acres of trash, if we lose this and they put in 700 acres of trash, that
Can't do that because the rest of it is floodplain.
well, hold on a second.
they can't put in more than 250 acres of trash. is what you're
Here's a
telling me
good,
right
here's a
now.
good question.
Not 1 acre more than 250
The only
acres.
thing they could do is the section of land, the 250 acre, it's actually 223 acre footprint that they have now. They can expand it towards Highway 6. They can't go any further east. And that, the difference is that currently it's 223. It'll go to 250 if they move it east. That's why the 250 is in the host agreement. And in the application, they're only asking for 223.
Could that be expanded, is my question.
It could be expanded from 223 to
I can answer that
250.
question for you.
That's it.
I wrote the laws.
Please, you need to.
Would you like me to speak?
Go ahead.
I was on the task force waste management policy in 1990, and I continue to tell you that, but I have to because there's people in here that don't know that. I was appointed by the Lieutenant Governor and Speaker of the House. In the process of going through all the things that you're debating tonight, they're not even worried about what happens below that 40-foot level. Because the federal government has set a requirement that you use double liners as a result of what happened in San Antonio at their landfill. Their clay liner that was previously the only liner we had fractured, and it traveled down a fault line to a business a quarter of a mile away. And a man went in one morning to drink a cup of coffee and read the newspaper as he sat in the restroom. And when he lit a cigarette, it blew up and he was killed. As a result of that situation, the law came about that we put the double liners with the artificial liner underneath or of the clay liner. And once that was done, your arguments about the water below that 40-foot level is not even consideration when you go to contested case hearing. And I have been a party in a three contested case hearings. And I didn't have an attorney. I represented myself in those hearings. So I know all of the information that your attorneys would know as to what's going to happen when you go into your contested case hearing. And since I helped write the law, I can tell you this, that when they start this landfill and they start digging that dirt out of there, they're going to go down 40 foot deep. And if it starts filled up with water, they're going to have wells around the perimeter of that landfill that will start drawing out water, and they'll draw until that water stops flowing. And that's not in a potable water area in your first aquifer, but that's down 40 feet deep. That water's going to be completely drawn out. If you've got shallow wells there for your livestock or some other reason in your pastures, those wells are going to go dry.
So, sir, in your opinion, if you don't think the TCEQ is going to help us out on the water issue, is there any other issues you think we could potentially go to them and say, hey,
The
this
issue,
is not a good environmental plan or anything at this point?
the issue I see that you have a stance on is the fact that it's within 2 miles of Hempstead. We didn't discuss that issue in great depth on the task force about how close you could put it to municipality. We left that to the TCEQ because there's special situations all over the state of Texas that we heard that somewhere on state lines that they don't have a place for a landfill if it's regulated by some distance that we would have to regulate. So they had to set up rulemaking within the TCEQ to make that available to the people as to what the law is going to be. In special circumstances, the TCEQ can rewrite some of the rules, and the rulemaking was left up to them. But besides the TCEQ, HGAC, Harrison Galveston County Council of Governments, a COG. We're in that COG, and as a COG, they're supposed to take the laws that we made in the state legislature and develop rules that they will implement that agrees with the TCEQ. I was supposed to be in that process, but I was completely worn out after working for a year all over the state of Texas with the state legislature. And I didn't go into that process in 2002, but I know in 2002, they discussed y'all, because you're in Region 6 of the HGAC. And the fact is, you're the only one in this region that don't have a landfill, you and Austin County. But as you were designated at HGAC, is that you and Austin County have to decide on how you're going to dispose of your waste in this region. So you have to go to Harrison Yellowstone County Council of Governments to discern how you're going to work with Austin County. Because at that time, you didn't have a population of 40,000. After you reach a population of 40,000, you can stand on your own. But you haven't set up that rulemaking yet. And as far as the fact that we need to make a landscape plan in this county, in Harris County, they require you not to be able to put a landfill within 125 foot of a road, because we had studies there that show the whole road was in danger because the close proximity of a landfill that goes straight down 40 feet. And that was done by McClellan Engineering. And by the way, the hydrology study done by this outfit is the same hydrologist that did the study for a landfill across the street from my house in Genoa. So I know how they operate when they get into the hearing process. I know what they're going to come to you with as far as the hydrology too.
Here's food, this is interesting, and this is food for thought too. Let's say you take what Rick just said earlier, and these studies are what they are, and it's scary stuff. Just food for thought. Under the host agreement, as a county, we would be legally prohibited from taking a position with the TCEQ contrary to Pintail under that host agreement, because we're contractually bound. So that's food for thought, another item to think about. I want to start getting through these questions. I know there's a lot more folks. Debbie. Okay, my gosh. This
I
is
have-
gonna go for it. Go ahead.
I have a lot of respect for you, Judge and Commissioners. You said this host agreement over 30 years, they'll give out $240,000 in scholarships. You know what that comes to a year over 30 years? Only $8,000 a year. That's
Right,
pittance.
it does.
That's nothing. 38 million to the county. That's a little over $1 million a year to the county. I think we can make that up in our development of our community as Houston moves out and tax rates go up. So we don't need that money. As the mayor of a city, and I saw Mayor Wolf here earlier, I was not asked one question in the negotiations of this host agreement. And the county, whoever negotiated it, is supposed to collect 50 cents per ton to be divided between 7 cities. Do you know how much that comes to? 7 cents a ton that we get, and we don't even get it. It goes to the Waller County revenue. We have to apply for the money that was supposed to come to us to be for anyway. So why are we applying for our own money to do capital improvements in our cities when that money should come directly to us?
And you're right.
So I was never asked a question. I only found out about the host agreement 2 weeks before y'all voted on it in 2013. And I was very upset that not one mayor in this county was approached to negotiate for their cities in this host agreement. So it should be null and void. We don't need it.
I'm asking people to read this thing so folk would know what's in this host agreement.
Right.
Well, I read it several times and I've read every page of
And
it.
wouldn't it have been great to have this forum and these conversations?
Would have been. That's why, I don't think it should be, you've already voted in Commissioner's Court to make the 2013 ordinance and the host agreement null and void.
To
And
agree
you
to the voiding.
So you need to stick to it, go back to the 2011 and beef it up and make it, get them out of where they want to be.
Okay.
We should not be, I don't care if Pintail loses $5 million because of their options they're paying for stuff. But when the people that own the property will not even allow discovery to be done on the property and require them to have a $2 million liability policy to set foot on that ground to go do a groundwater study, that's ridiculous.
All right, Debbie, your time's up. So.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure I understand.
We need that for you.
As a Commissioner on Environmental Quality, did I understand one of y'all, I think it was you, to say that never once have they not approved the landfill? They have never not approved the landfill. So it's pretty much a
They
moot.
have never not disapproved the land. You talking about TCEQ?
Yeah, not, in other words, they will approve it. We really don't have anything,
Well, I think
we don't have a leg to stand on. They're pretty much
There's
done
some,
pushing through.
I think there would, let me just say this. I think there would be some, if somebody were to make the statement that the TCQ has approved every landfill's ever been, I think there would be people here that would say, no, that's not true. I also think there would be a very wide disparity if people were to say, there's some people that say, we can't stop, TCQ is going to grant it, we're going to stop it. I think there's a lot of folks here tonight from Cal that have a different opinion on that. I will say this, I know that they're already in discovery. They are already deposing expert witnesses in the contested case hearing, which is set for August. I personally think TCEQ is going to see, they're going to see a response not like unlike anything they have ever seen, as far as expert witness testimony. So again, I'd like the county to not be, personal opinion, to not be personally bound, to have to take a position one way or the other when it comes to TCEQ in this contested case here.
Okay, my other question was.
Okay. Oh, no, you're not allowed to.
Okay.
I got a lot of people here.
My question, I want you to clarify.
Okay.
Did I understand when you were going through your PowerPoint that the commissioners, that Waller County is bound by this, but the commissioners personally are not? And if I understand, that's what I thought you said, that the commissioners, as commissioners and as a voting body for the county, are being sued. But
In their official capacity.
yes, but they cannot be, they are not being sued as a
No.
personal. Okay, so what holds anybody to saying I'm gonna do what I say I'm gonna do if we can't, in other words, we can't recoup any of that money from them privately. We can't go to Concluder.
They were not
We
sued.
can't go to any of them.
They were not sued. No, they were not sued in their individual capacities. They were sued in their official capacities. So to the extent that there's liability, it's on the county. They are not personally liable for those attorney's fees or any of that stuff. Now, what other, what if they did violate the law? Well, then there's criminal. There could be criminal repercussions to that. But so far, special prosecutors have determined that they don't feel that there is enough for them to meet their burden of proof to bring charges. Special prosecutors did find a lot of problems with Waller County, that business as usual can no longer be tolerated, and that we need a public information officer, we need our document retention policy to be updated and revised. I mean, there's a list that they gave. So they didn't think that, that some, in fact, I think they made the comment that some commissioners have fallen into the very bad habit of discussing public business in private. So, and again, that's what we're trying to fix. And by the way, that brings me to another point. This was a publicly noticed meeting pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, because what you have here is a quorum, and we are discussing public policy. So this was noticed. This is legal. We are not violating any laws.
So to that end, you're saying that.
This is your third question.
We can't.
I got a third question.
So to that end, we as citizens, the only way we're gonna gather up this money that y'all finally come to an agreement with in your litigation is through taxpayer money, right?
It's going yes. If we do a settlement where we're going to pay attorney's fees, it is coming from taxpayer funds.
And do we have that surplus,
We do.
or we're gonna have to get a bond? to all
No,
this together?
we do. For people that don't know, over the last 2 years, because we have these facilities issues that we knew we were going to be dealing with, we have been building a reserve fund. So we do actually have several